Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to Friday Night Live. You are joined by Brother Omar. We are normally hosting a fair reflection, but we were doing a special show this week. As you know, the situation in Palestine, Gaza, and the Middle East has significantly escalated. And we're going to look at it from an angle, obviously, of the civilians and trying to understand the situation there, what life is like in Gaza. Also, we're going to have a couple of special guests join us later on in the show from various Muslim countries, talking about what sort of response they think will come from the wider Muslim world or the Arab world. And we'll get into that discussion a little later on. I'm joined in the studio by our co-host, Brother Asad, by Brother Tariq, who does not need an introduction, and by Rob Roach, who is a local councillor in our region. I will introduce him a little later on, just to give you a rundown on what the show will consist of today. So firstly, we will be discussing the Palestine situation, as I've told you, looking at it from the angle of what the civilians in Gaza will be going through at this moment in time, how the conflict has escalated to what it is today. The second part of the show will be on Islamophobia. It's been highlighted, and we want to speak to the local organizations to find out how it has risen, what the causes are, and how we can counter it. And not just Islamophobia. Obviously, that's a good opportunity for us to discuss Islamophobia, but other things, maybe anti-Semitism, maybe other crimes of that nature. It will be a good discussion to have. And lastly, we'll be discussing the cold weather that's coming in after these entirely political discussions and global scale discussions. We will look at how to survive the winter, because winter is coming. So I'll turn to my panel. We're joined by, as I said, Rob Roach. Rob is the portfolio holder of finance, and he is a Labour councillor in Northwell. Rob, thank you very much for joining us. I know this was very last minute for you, so I appreciate that you've taken the time out to actually come with us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So, Rob, just starting the discussion. Of course, you belong to the Labour Party. What has Labour and what has your colleague? What have you said or made a statement about Palestine? What's your stance on it from your position? And then we'll talk on a personal level.
Sure. The position of the Labour group is the statement is that we want a ceasefire immediately. We want to start peace talks again. We want humanitarian aid to go in, and we want people to be able to come out of Gaza, and we just want to make sure that innocent people do not get killed anymore.
Right. And do you think that's doable? Do you think the larger Labour Party and its leadership, because a lot of Muslims in particular have questioned the Labour Party's stance on the entire situation, in how they were very quick to condemn obviously what happened in Israel, but they have said very little or not clearly enough about what's been happening in Palestine. So do you think this will be something they entertain?
No. The leaders, the Labour Party, National Party stance is quite clear. They want a humanitarian pause, which is completely different to what not just us as a Labour group in Luton, that many Labour groups all over the country are asking our leader to go to the government and to the United Nations and to America and tell them we want a ceasefire, because what is happening has got to stop, because it's breaking my heart. In all fairness, it's tough.
And I mean, this is a good segue to take it and make it a bit more personal. What's your own stance? Obviously, you represent the people of Luton. They want to hear what one of the councillors has to say and what your opinions are on the issue. So it'd be interesting to hear.
Well, my opinions on the issue, as they always have been, to solve any conflict, you have to look at how it started and why it started. And that's my own opinion, why it started in the first place. You have to look at all the resolutions United Nations have in place, and you have to talk. You're not going to solve anything without talking. And I've been quite inspired by some symbolic gestures I've seen just lately. The first symbolic gesture was the Israeli lady who shook the hands of the Palestinian.
Yes.
Well, that was, to me, that was powerful. And then today on the news, I saw a Palestinian lady and an Israeli lady who are massive, great friends of each other, and they are working with Palestinian and Israeli ladies to try in their way to try and make a difference.
Right.
So for me, the symbolic gestures, because if I go back and think about how Northern Ireland was sold, because we had our issues with Northern Ireland, a lot of it came from these symbolic gestures, how it started, where the people in Ireland said, look, we don't want this.
Yeah.
And that's what's needed. The people of Palestine and Israel are saying, they've got to say, and I think the people of Israel are getting there, say, no, enough's enough. We just don't want this. We want a government now that's going to say, we're going to go for peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to put the question to you, a lot of people thinking now, in the community, well, what's the point of voting for people who don't represent us? And I'm just going to have to be straightforward and blunt. Why should people vote for Labour after everything that's happened?
It's very hard to say why they should. In all fairness, I think I'd rather hope they'd be looking at the statements we've been putting out. There's some more. We've got some things we're going to say in the next week or so. And I'd rather hope they can see we're trying to represent the community. We're trying to support the community, but we can't solve it.
Yeah,
we just can't solve this. I mean, it's got to be solved through the world leaders rather than a little Labour group in Luton.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you staying back, and it should be pointed out that we do criticize people that don't speak out. And obviously, I approached Rob very last minute to join our discussion, and the fact you had and a number of other councillors, not just today, but even previously who I've asked to speak to, have just said no. So we should point and raise the people that do take that stand. And so we appreciate you, Rob, for taking the time out and speaking to us. Thank you very much.
Rob, sorry, just quickly before you leave, just in regards to the Labour response itself, I know you've obviously just mentioned regarding the statement. Personally, again, asking your own kind of thoughts regarding the statement, do you feel it's maybe a week, 2 weeks too late? Do you feel the response should have been earlier? I think a lot of the general feedback that we're getting from the community is that there was a lot of silence initially, and for some reason, whatever that may be, reluctancy in speaking about the matter at all and hoping that it may go away. Is there any particular reason, maybe from a party line, that you may understand?
I don't think I don't think it's a party line. I really don't. I just think it's caught everybody out, and I understand with the first statement that we put out, it was late. I think we accept that was late, and we also accept that sometimes that first statement, the wording wasn't probably correct either. I think there is an acceptance of what we did and how we acted. But we need to let the community know we are supportive and we are trying to support the community. But Luton is a big community as well. We have other people we need to make sure we look after as well. But it's been tough. It's been tough for every Labour council. Every council, I would say, not just Labour council.
It has to be said that there are politically, it could be hard to tread, and I understand that. However, there are certain things which are which any human should speak out against. And it was clear when it happened, obviously on the October 7th, everyone was willing to speak out. However, one life cannot be more important than the other. And that's just the ultimate truth. And that's not political. That's not, a particular religion or a particular race. You cannot put one person and one civilian over another civilian. And that is, I think, that the entire heart of this issue. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And such a short notice.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
We have been joined in, not in the studio, but virtually through the wonderful miracle of the internet, by Yasser Janjua and Dr. Turhan Ozin. I'll introduce Yasser Janjua first. Yasser, are you on the line? Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Just to introduce Yasser Janjua, he started his military career in 1990. We're talking about the Pakistan military here. And eventually he studied in the universities of the US and the UK. He is a subject matter specialist on security and risk management and has taught at leading Pakistani university. His work experience spans across North America, the UK, Europe, and the Middle East, as well as in Pakistan. Thank you for joining us. I would like to start off the discussion by getting a feel of what the local population in Pakistan is feeling about what's happening in Palestine right now.
Well, the Pakistani local population is obviously very concerned and emotional about this. They've always been emotional. Uh, Pakistan has always taken sides with the Palestinian cause, no matter what happened. Pakistanis as a nation and Pakistani government as a government has always manifested its desires for the separate state of Palestine. And that's the reason, despite some pressures, some backdoor diplomacies in the past years and decades, Pakistan has refused to recognize Israel, uh, despite the fact that we all know that recognition of Israel would have brought in huge economic, financial benefits for Pakistan. But successive Pakistani governments know that the population will not accept anything less than statehood for Palestinians and the liberation of Baitul Muqaddas, which is the Qibla Awal and which is very sacred to the Pakistanis, Muslims all over the world. Uh, I must say, private Muslims all over the world, because the governments,
Yeah.
I don't think, are doing enough. Muslim governments are not doing enough to represent our cause across the globe. So I must say, it's the individual citizens who have their passions and emotions running very high. But unfortunately, the governments do not think that. They think their economic benefits and material interests are more important than the Qibla Awal. I am sorry to say
Yeah.
quite bluntly. Uh,
No,
if that
we
answers the
appreciate your.
question.
It does. No, it does, and I think it's in line with what my reading of the situation is. So it does make sense. I think people have taken it as a personal matter
And I,
rather than a global
And I
matter. Yes,
also
go
have
ahead.
to say this thing. And I also have to say this thing because you've got a wide listenership, at least in the UK. So I have to ask Western democracies if in the Second World War in early 1940s or 1944-45, if what was happening to Jews, and they call it ethnic cleansing and genocide, so if that was ethnic cleansing and genocide, so what is going on now in Gaza? What would they call this? And if this is not ethnic cleansing and genocide, then unfortunately that was also not ethnic cleansing and genocide, because they can't be different. As of today, almost 9,000 children, women, and elderly people have been killed in Gaza in the last 3 weeks, and complete villages have been razed to ground. And nobody's speaking up that this is genocide and ethnic cleansing. And there's a definite, very clear, demonstrated plan of Israel to raise these communities, and then they build up Israeli settlements there. So why can't the Western democracies call it ethnic cleansing and genocide? And I'm sorry, your counselor who was sitting here a few minutes ago, he was very, very kind in saying, well, this should stop, there should be a ceasefire. But why can't the Western democracies and everybody sitting in, for example, in the UK, get up and say it's ethnic cleansing, it's genocide, and it's no different than what was happening to the Jews? And by the way, what happened to the Jews, Muslims did not do it. It was the Christians who were doing it. And this time, go on. I'm sure I've taken longer than my share of time.
No. Go ahead. I mean, I think what you're saying over here is perhaps the opinion of many. But the question I want to ask you is, obviously we all understand and agree that a lot has not happened from Muslim countries. But when we speak to Palestinians, and it's long been the case with Palestinians that they hold Muslim countries to a very high, high sort of on a high level. So, and one thing you hear from them, from a lot of them, is if nobody else backs them, they have this feeling that Pakistan and Turkey are those special countries that will always have, will always protect them, or will be like the spine for them. Do you feel like there will be more from the Pakistani government compared to what's already been done by them?
What has been done by them
Unfortunately,
also?
unfortunately, at this time, even if first and foremost, for the Pakistani government or in the Turkish government to do anything in terms of material support in addition to aid, well, Pakistanis, I believe right now, Pakistan is not probably in a position to give aid, but obviously they will still send in some aid. Uh, more than that, the Pakistani government right now, the Pakistani nation is not in a position, as you all know, the condition Pakistan is in right now. So I don't think Pakistan has the capacity at the moment to act on its own. But Pakistan does. Pakistan has sent its ex-army chief to lead the Muslim nations' armed forces. He's stationed General Rahil Sharif. He's stationed in Riyadh, and that's the kind of force that was created, so to say. So he's leading that. So Pakistan has, in a way, contributed.
Are you referring to
Sorry?
the IMCTC force in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
I mean, objectively, what's the benefit of them, though?
Well, technically, I find it's a toothless organization, or it's a toothless force, to be honest.
Mhm.
But at least if somebody wants to gear up things, there's a mechanism which is already created. It just has to be activated. It's not working. It's dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Pakistan on its own.
It feels like. Mhm.
Pakistan on its own cannot. It's not in a position. If the other Muslim nations, leading Muslim countries, do not take the leadership role, despite whatever Pakistani people feel, despite whatever Pakistani nation feels, we cannot just get up and just wage a
Yes.
war against Israel.
It seems 100. It seems that it is not for one country to do, and I think it's too big a task for one country to do. But someone has to lead it. Now, it would be noted by journalists that Imran Khan, when he was in government, he was extremely vocal. Obviously, Kashmir and Palestine, and so he was almost leading the charge. Even when when Jerusalem was changed as the official capital, I remember how vocal and how straightforward he was on the matter. It feels that the current government does not. Well, it's not coming up. Shehbaz Sharif and his clique and the interim government have not taken any substantial stand at all. Does that not sit well with the Pakistani people? I mean, has there been protests? Has there been outrage on this?
No, there's not been an outrage on this particular issue. Well, the interim government does not have the mandate, first and foremost. And
Of course.
I may call it a conspiracy theory, but there are people who say that Nawaz Sharif has been brought back on the Zionist agenda, so that he is installed back in for the fourth time, and then he recognizes Israel. If that is to happen, this would be dangerous and this would be criminal. Pakistani people are very, very emotional. But there are people, a lot of people are talking about it already, that Nawaz Sharif has been sent home on a definite agenda to recognize Israel, which Imran Khan flatly had refused. He did not. They think, and that is why, and that is where the West has always used people like Nawaz Sharif and Zardari, those who have some dark shadows in their closets. They can be twisted and they can be asked to do things that the West would want them to do. And that's the dangerous part.
Absolutely.
And a person like Imran Khan is somebody who cannot be reined in by the Westerners, and that's why they've gotten rid of him and they put him in jail, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments. I understand where you're coming from. Let me make this more personal, because obviously you have a military background. As most people understand, Pakistan does have a massive military influence. We don't need to go into too much detail there, but I think it's quite understood that there is a large percentage of what happens in foreign policy is dictated by what the military wants. What is the overall military feeling on this? Because it seems the military and the country itself is very divided right now, whether it's Imran Khan or whether it's Shehbaz Sharif, and on many issues. So is there a combined opinion on this issue in the military, do you think? Because I know you probably have contact with the current servicemen.
The thing is, the division on internal politics aside, when it comes to foreign policy, no matter what happened, the government and the military are on the same page. They have to be on the same page. They can't have different voices. It is just not possible for them to go out to the public in the international arena and have different views. The military is subservient to the government, to the elected government. As of now, there's no elected government.
I mean,
and that's what.
That's in a normal democracy. That's in a normal democracy. Pakistan is obviously a very special case. That's why I asked the question.
I know you what you're trying to imply. Pakistan is a special case. However, the military would straightforwardly say we will follow the United Nations Charter and we will follow the international community. The military will not just mind you, we are not a rogue army. Pakistan is not a rogue army where they can just
Mhm.
get up one day and nuke the missiles and say, "There we go," because you're bombing Gaza, we are coming. No, we are a professional army, and we have rules, we
Mm.
have discipline. We don't do like that. We are going to operate when there's an international commitment to whatever wherever we have been called in. We have responded to the international call, whether it's United Nations or whether it's Saudi Arabia. We have gone to Saudi Arabia to help them in the Gulf War, but we don't just do it like that on our own, and that you will see it will not
Mhm.
happen, and that's not likely to happen.
I mean,
Not at all.
just to counter that, you say that obviously the military and the government is on the same page on foreign policy. I would have to disagree with that. As we saw with the Russian situation with Ukraine and everything, Imran Khan took a stance. The army stayed quiet. Obviously, at the time, as soon as Imran Khan was kicked out, the chief of army staff comes out and says, "Well, it was wrong, and we will side with Ukraine,
I
and this
knew
should
you were
stop."
going to come on
So,
to this.
in all
I
fairness,
knew.
yeah. So the question arises: is if they can do it for Ukraine, why on earth can they not do it for Palestine?
See, for anyone to stand up today on today's date, whether it's the military leadership or the political leadership, it would be suicidal for them to stand up and side with the US. So nobody can dare. Yes, somebody can stand up and say, well, we are with Palestinians, which they all are saying we are with the Palestinians, and they're reiterating the Palestinian cause. Now, the difference between this and the Ukrainian issue, uh, I, as long as Imran Khan was in power, and he's been saying that afterwards as well, that armed forces and the foreign ministry were taken on board and a green signal was given
Mm-hmm.
for him to go to Russia. So afterwards, what happened is all politics. I am not going to go into the greater details of what happened,
Mhm.
why the army chief said what he said, and that I'm sorry to say that still could be an individual, which is General Qamar Javed Bajwa, that could be his own thoughts that he said. That's not the institution's position, because the institution is
Right.
subservient to the government and that stays subservient to the government. Well, the man at the head, the army chief, if he starts thinking otherwise, unfortunately, in Pakistan system, nobody can stop him. But the fact remains, the institution is always subservient to the government of Pakistan, and they take orders
Right.
from the government of Pakistan.
So, yeah, so other than this sort of difference, I suppose, between Ukraine and Palestine, do you feel like there's any other? Because obviously in the West, there's been a lot of sort of outcry that the difference and the reporting when it came to Russia and Ukraine is very different to currently between Israel and Palestine. So do you feel do you feel this, or do you feel that it's very similar or very different? What's your take on this?
And just if you could keep that within a minute, because we'll be going on a break. Thank you very much.
Right. I think there is definitely a difference in reporting over Ukraine and Palestine. And the obvious reason is because the medias are controlled by, for example, in case of Russia-Ukraine conflict, you were getting the information from Russia Today, which was different, and CNN and BBC would be given different news. And same is the case here now. Al Jazeera is saying something else, whereas if you hear CNN and BBC, you will hear something different. So the reporting is now being seen as who's reporting it. If it's CNN is reporting it, no matter how we say they are independent, but they are not. They take their
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us and discussing this very important topic. And it's good to get an overview of what the sentiment is across the Muslim world, and obviously Pakistan being a major hub. It was very, very useful insight. Thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers. Thank you.
So, listeners, we will be going on a break within 30 seconds. And just to sum up, we've been speaking to one of the local councillors and also to one of the analysts based in Pakistan about the Palestine issue, please text in your thoughts and your sentiments on 07779 481822. We do have a few texts and I'll read them after the break. The number is 07779 481822, and we will be back after the break. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Friday Night Live. We are discussing a very critical situation which is developing in the Middle East. As you are aware, the Gaza conflict that's been happening and is now in its third week, almost entering its fourth. Things have become very difficult for the Palestinians. The death toll has risen incredibly. and the sentiment in Luton and the surrounding areas seem to be of pain, of hurt. And so we want to continue this discussion with our next guests. We are joined by Tariq Khamis, who is the treasurer and acting secretary of Luton Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And also we have Brother Ahmed Baker, who has also joined us. Can both of you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Thank you very much. So we've been talking, obviously, as you heard in the first segment, to various people. There was a councillor here from one of the local Luton bodies. And also we've been speaking to the analyst from Pakistan, just try to get the gauge, understand the feelings of the Muslims around the world, not just Muslims, humans around the world. So I want to start with you, Brother Tariq. Do you feel that it's different this time? Because obviously I know, being part of the Luton Palestine Solidarity Campaign, you've been around for a long time, and we've seen in my own lifetime, I've seen how different scenarios have brought out the Muslim response, and not just Muslim response, but even the non-Muslim response. Do you feel it's different this time?
I don't think there's really a massive difference except for the scale that we're seeing. It has always been Israel's plan and the Zionist plan to take over the whole of the West Bank and the whole of Gaza. It was just a question of how, what, and when, and trying to get international approval to do it, so they're not condemned. But Israel has been attacking the Palestinians, ethnically cleansing them for 75 years. Today, we're seeing, never mind what's happening in Gaza, we are seeing in the West Bank, the settlers, defended and aided by the IDF, attacking Palestinians in their villages, attacking olive groves, as they always have been doing, but to a much greater extent. They're using the horrific events of the 7th of October. It is sad that Hamas did that, because they have given Israel an excuse for something they wanted to do. And today you're seeing what is really in no other ways described other than a genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. They're basically saying to the Gaza people, get out of Gaza any way you can, trying to force the Egyptians to take 2 million plus Palestinians out of Gaza into Egypt as refugees, so they can go and walk in and take over Gaza. And if people don't go, they're basically saying, and have been saying, quite a lot of them have been saying publicly, they will kill you all. And we're seeing this. We're seeing where they're telling people to go down safe routes and then bombing them. They're seeing hospitals being bombed, schools being bombed. These are not targets for a war. These are some of the worst war crimes we see. You see that this government's hypocrisy. They will condemn the Russians for doing the same, which they have done. You look at the rubble they leave in Ukraine and the cities, and you're seeing the same in Gaza. And yet, what does our government, what does the Labour Party leadership do today? They do not condemn that. They just say, oh, they have an excuse to defend themselves. Well, if that is self-defense, this world is dead. We're going to see wars and murders everywhere, because they have now just justified this, that as long as you find some sort of reason, then you can commit a war crime. And the UN and the Geneva Convention is quite clear that there is no justification for war crimes. Israel must be taken into account, but also our government, the American government, the German government, the French government, all their leaders should be taken into account. We should be taken to the ICC for supporting genocide. There's no other way we can rest until that happens. That is our feeling, because in the end of the day, we have to have Palestinians able to live free, to live in justice, and live with Jews. We are not against Jewish people. We are not against them having a joint country with us or anything, but on equality, not in an apartheid state, and a state that's committed to the murder of the Palestinian people.
Yeah, it reminds me when you said about the government's being complicit of the saying that it's not that evil people do evil things, it's the fact good people stay silent. And it seems that the world right now is at a time where people need to be speaking. I think the challenge, and that's what we're trying to understand from this show and speaking to you and the other guests that we've had, the challenge becomes, if it was so easy for people to do it for the Ukraine crisis, if it was so easy for people to do it on the 7th of October, when the people that were dying were Israelis, if it was so easy and so popular, then why is it different when it comes to Palestine? Now, what are your thoughts as someone representing the organization? What's different here? Why are people shying away? I mean, I'll give you an example. Very recently, I had the opportunity of asking a number of local leaders in our community to speak on this subject, and some were Muslims, and I was widely refused. What's happening? Why are people so shy on commenting on these issues?
I think there's two things. First of all, I think very briefly I can say why that is. I think some people are scared because of the smear campaign of saying that if to support the Palestinians is somehow anti-Semitic, which is a totally ridiculous concept. That the fact that if you defend the people who are the victims of 75 years of oppression by an oppressor, are somehow when they come out and try and fight for their rights, which is their rights under Geneva Convention, by the way, and international law, that somehow they are now the criminals, they are the people in the wrong. This is something we have to say to people and educate them, and also to give them strength. And I tell you how we can do that, to give people strength, so they know they can actually do something, because a lot of these people would like to do something. The first thing, tomorrow at the town hall at 12 noon, there will be a demonstration rally, and we want that to be the biggest rally you have ever seen in Luton. There were 1,000 people last Sunday and Friday. Last time we had this. Let's make that 2,000-3,000 people. Let's fill up the whole of the Luton town centre and make sure people know what you feel. You can come there. No one will know your name, but come there and show your support, because that is very important. That's the thing what you can do, your listeners can do. It may be raining, it may be cold, but remember, you haven't got bombs coming down. It's not your children who are being bombed, your children who are being shot. And that is what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza and quite a few in the West Bank. So that's the first thing you can do. The second thing, always you do, follow the BDS movement campaign, which is the Boycott, Disinvestment and Sanction campaign. Very successful in South Africa when they were under apartheid. Now, we have made some major victories. We ask you to do that now. And if you can do that, you just go out, don't buy Israeli goods, don't buy Puma, don't invest with or buy AXA insurance products. Don't go into buy HP. Don't go to and put your account in Barclays. Take your account from Barclays. Tell them why you're taking your account out, because of their complicity in supporting armament trade and Israeli arms companies. These are things you can do. A very effective campaign, and you don't have to shout about it if that's not what you want to do. But you know, in your heart, you're defending the Palestinian people. You're defending the victims of the most horrific war crimes we have seen for a long time.
Tariq, just quickly wanted to come in. I remember you speaking at the last time we gathered outside the town hall not so long ago. And I remember you mentioning that you are a member, and if I'm not correct me if I'm wrong, regarding the Labour Party. What has your feeling been internally, and has your stance changed on the Labour Party in the last 2-3 weeks whilst this is going on? We were fortunate enough to have Rob from the local Luton Council, who did stay back from a previous programme, to say that Labour have issued a statement. He did agree, albeit be a little late. What's your thoughts about the Labour Party? And I know you mentioned that the overall response from the political parties here in the UK and maybe across the world hasn't quite been what would have been expected and possibly was for the Ukraine matter, but of course not for the Palestinian matter. What's your current thoughts around the Labour Party and how they responded and the possible delay in the response?
First of all, can I just make it clear? I'm here as representing the Luton Palestine Solidarity Campaign. I am a member of the Labour Party, but in no way can I say I'm representing the Labour Party here. However, I do have, as a member of the Labour Party, I have serious concerns about the leadership's position on this. They should be calling unequivocally for a ceasefire now. No conditions attached. And yes, the hostages should be released, but so should the prisoners that Israel has, the hostages that Israel has, mainly from the West Bank. There's loads of people arrested, children arrested, no charges, under administrative detention for many, many months and years sometimes, and there's no charges against them. This is hostage taking. Just because it's a state doesn't mean that they get out of the excuse of the way they're taking people in and keeping them. a child in the West Bank throws a stone at an occupying soldier and then gets arrested and is taken away without their parents. A 12-year-old has been done to, taken away, and for 3 months, and made to sign a statement in Hebrew they can't read. This is hostage taking, and we call for all hostages, both Palestinian and the ones in Gaza, should be released, because this is not what we support. We do not support killing civilians. We do not support these sort of actions. We support a resistance against occupation, a resistance against a blockade, which is targeting and specifically the people who are doing that, and which is not civilians, but the IDF and the Israeli state.
Thank you, Tariq. Appreciate that. We're going to bring in our next guest as well, Brother Ahmed Baker. He's Palestinian from Beit Nuba, and a village occupied and demolished in 1967. And now he's lived in multiple places: Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and now England. Brother Ahmed, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Just to start off, obviously for you, this, I'm sure, as has been for the last many, many years, this must be a very emotional time. What's the one message that you would like to use this platform for? People are listening, people are emotional, people understand somewhat the plight of the Palestinians, but having been someone that's visited the country myself, I realized that we don't understand anything until we actually go there. So what is the one message you want to give to the locals listening? How bad is this situation there?
Thanks for having me. And there are quite a lot of messages streaming in my head. But if it's only for one message, we know the suffering is great. We know the loss of life is great. We know that the Palestinians have been subjugated to this for almost a century now. And the message I want to give to the world is, especially to the public, a lot of people, is this is a long battle, this is a long war, this is a long journey, and I don't want the support that we're seeing now to wither, to slow down, because the bombing will eventually stop. The army, the attacks will stop, but the suffering of the Palestinians will not. And what we have seen in 2021, in 2014, in 2012, in 2008, 2009, we have huge support. Then things slow down and people go back to their normal life, while the Palestinian life still continues to be a misery. Brother Tariq mentioned the BDS, and the Palestine Solidarity Campaign in Luton is very effective, and have been engaged with them in a lot of activities, and they've been doing great. And I will ask everyone to join long-term activity, not just sympathize with Palestinians, not to be angry during this time, which we have to be angry. This is not normal, this is not acceptable. But to think that when this is over, things haven't finished. When the bomb stops, the occupation doesn't. When the bomb stops, the killing of Palestinians doesn't stop. When the bomb stops, the suffering of the Palestinians doesn't stop. So I want people to remember that, and not just to be emotional now and things then go back to normal. Please don't. And that would be the message I would like to share, if it's one message.
Thank you very much, Brother Ahmed. That's a very important message. Picking up on your message as well, as Brother Tariq said about BDS, there's a lot of, I just want to understand from your opinion, especially Brother Tariq, that there is, I won't say a rumor, but a lot of people feel that perhaps BDS is not as effective as it should be. There's a lot of, let's just call it, fake news, in the sense that this brand has done this and this brand has done that, this brand is doing this, so boycott all of them. So I want to understand from you, how effective is BDS, and where can we find the most up-to-date and correct information which we can rely on?
BDS is unbelievably effective. It is the most effective thing. I can't emphasize how strong and effective it is. But I'll tell you how to explain how effective is BDS. The UK has tried several times to legislate to stop the BDS. and there is a draft legislation. They stopped the BDS for councils to officially to boycott. In America, they stopped any federal funding to any organization that support the BDS, and they won't go that far if it doesn't hurt. Academic BDS is very effective and very hurtful for Israel, and they spend billions of pounds trying to counterattack that. So, how to support? Over the last 3 weeks, I've been getting messages from all people, boycott this, boycott that, boycott this company. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Targeting, boycotting. That works effectively. That hurts them, get the message clear, and has the biggest impact. You want to reach a proper impact, make a difference, targeting BDS. The boycott, divestment, sanctions movement have a good website, good on social media. Just look them up. They have simple, straightforward leaflets naming 4 or 5 products, companies, brands. As Tariq has mentioned, Puma, HB, Barclays, McDonald's, very, very specific, very targeted. So these are the brands that support Israel. However, and this is also important, they are the Israeli products. Very easy to boycott. It won't hurt you. It won't harm you. I see dates Palestinian marketed with an image that it is Palestinian when it's Israeli dates. Sainsbury openly sells hummus that is produced in the occupied territories in the West Bank, in the settlements. You can do without that. You can easily boycott it. These are things that you can easily boycott, all Israeli products and targeting companies. Don't boycott all these medias that you get messages, boycott as the little Sainsbury, all these things. This is like wasting energy, and you will get tired and you will not continue. Targeting BDS, targeting sanctions, targeting boycotting, most effective. Target specific companies, they will feel the pinch, they will feel the pain, and they will respond. And BDS.
Can I just say to that? Sorry, can I just say the site you want to go to is the bdsmovement.net. So note that down, bdsmovement.net. That is run from Palestine by the Palestinians, and they will tell you the targets and what's happening and all the news. And you will see lots of images of hundreds of products they're saying you should boycott. The problem with that is lots of that actually is derived from Israel. Deliberate policy by Israel to confuse the movement. If you boycotted every product that sold or existed inside Israel, you wouldn't be able to live because you'd starve. That is the reality. And they know that. They know the way to weaken us is to do that. So do look at the BDS movement, look at the targeted products, and fight the BDS campaign by not using them. If you're in Barclays, pull it out. If you're using AXA, stop it and go to a new one. I think there's lots of things you can do. Not buy Puma. Big international campaign against Puma is hurting Puma, and they are thinking of pulling out of the Israeli Football Association because they're wondering about what that's doing to their products. If they can see that it's hurting, they will do something, and then no one else will sponsor the Israeli Football Association because they know of the bad publicity it brings. So that's why it's so effective. So try and do it that way, and do ignore the mass produce things. And also, as you said, is there anything made in Israel? Check, is it made in Israel? Don't buy it. That's very simple to do, and there's not that much out there. Okay.
Thank you for that, Tariq. Just to clarify, of course, this is the Friday Night Live show. We are speaking to Tariq Khamis and Ahmed Baker there. Thank you for the 2 guests. The boycotting of any goods, of course, is the personal opinion of our guests here, not, of course, the the official line of the radio station, just to be clear. It is, of course, the opinion of our guests here, which is Tariq Khamis, who we're speaking to, and Ahmed Baker, and thank you for your thoughts. Unfortunately, we do not have any of these companies at hand to speak at the moment, and we're not in a position where we can, of course, have an alternative opinion. So just need to bring that in, Tariq. But with Ahmed, I think one of the things I wanted to just ask yourself was, to be honest, I mean, I don't know if it's unfortunate or fortunately, where I myself, of course, was from a Pakistani background, do not have any direct relatives in Palestine. But over the last few weeks, the conversations we've been having with journalists and many different stories coming out, the whole Muslim Brotherhood, as we feel, as the pain of the Ummah is very much there. And I feel that, although it's not direct immediate family, the pain I think everybody's feeling is there. With yourself, of course, with having family there, being Palestinian yourself, what are your thoughts? And is there any family members that you've got out there at the moment that are actually going through this? What's communication like? I know there's often news coming out around the lack of communication, the internet being cut off, for example. Is there any latest updates you have regarding that?
I don't have any family in Gaza, but I have friends in Gaza. And the situation is very hard. My friend, he's from Shuja'iyya. His house was bombed within the first week. He's now in southern Gaza, and I send him a message sometimes a day or 2 days till I get the blue tick and he gets some network and replies. Life is a struggle. Everybody in Gaza has immediate member of their family or friend, their inner circle, who's killed. That's literally everyone in Gaza. They say in Gaza, like, if you see somebody, they'll say, "Oh, do you know somebody so and so?" The next sentence, "Yeah, he's killed." Life is hard. People are starting to struggle. All the resources are running out because of Gaza used to get like 500 lorries a day. They allowed, I think, about 120 in the last 3 weeks. So resources are scarce. Life is a struggle, pain. They don't get the luxury of stopping for a second to feel the suffering and the pain and the loss they're going through, because you hear the bomb and someone dies, and then you hear another bomb and someone else is killed, and so on. So the suffering doesn't stop to give you that pause to reflect and think of what you've lost.
SubhanAllah. I know you just touched upon the number of lorries possibly coming in. We've had a number of charity appeals here on the radio, and I'm sure our listeners may have seen some on TV and elsewhere. What's the aid like? I know there's possibly a few charities working there, but again, information, not necessarily knowing what's correct, what's not. Seeing that there's certain borders is of course aid being allowed in. I know obviously you've seen that it's very much reduced aid. So the people of Gaza itself, so one is possibly situations where, and again, if you've had contact with people, not only of course worrying about being killed with of course various different weaponry, but also the fact that of hunger and starvation, and also maybe disease and all sorts of SubhanAllah. Is there in regards to humanitarian aid, what's it like at the moment? Are charities a bit more able to get in aid at the moment?
No, that's the challenge. Like, and I can't comment on the politics, but because I don't have that inside knowledge. The Rafah crossing is controlled by Egypt, and everything is going through the Rafah crossing. Israel has to approve of. So they've not approved any humanitarian aid going in. They allowed 120 lorries a few days ago, over the last few days, which is very, very small number for a population of 2 million people. Trade and support, like this is nothing. So, and it's all between Israel and Egypt, and Israel is blocking it, and Egypt is responding to Israel demands.
Can I just
Yeah.
say, people, just to remind you before we finish today, that there's a demo rally tomorrow outside the town hall at 12 noon. Bring your friends, bring your family, bring anyone you know. The more we have there, the more effective telling our councillors and our MPs they must call for a ceasefire and for justice for the Palestinians now.
Thank you very much, Brother Tariq and Brother Ahmed, for joining us and for your input.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that was our special guest for this segment, where we're discussing the situation in Palestine, what is happening, what activities are happening in our community. As Brother Tariq mentioned, there is a protest tomorrow. I'd also like to mention that there is a football charity event that's happening on Saturday of the 11th of November. We'll give more details after the break. Continue to join us after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We have a very special episode for you. We've just been discussing the Palestine situation. We had a look at the different reactions from around the world, and even in our local community, what work is happening or what awareness is being raised. As everyone I'm sure is aware, there is a dire situation that is undertaken in Palestine as we speak. Already 9,000 plus people have lost their lives on the Palestinian side. The event that occurred on the 7th of October, more than 1,000 people on the Israeli side lost their lives. And so in retaliation, Israel has launched a massive offensive against the Palestinian people. However, the number of innocent people that have died has exceeded over 75% of the 9,000 number that I quoted. And I know it's higher today. This was from the last time that I checked. It's constantly rising. It's a tragedy. It's a massive tragedy. And from reports, there may be a ground operation also. We don't know to what scale this is going to go. Previously, nothing has been this life heavy, if that makes sense. We have had a huge loss of life in this particular incident. And obviously, this is a crisis which has been ongoing. And as all of our guests have pointed and alluded to that point, this is not a single event that's just taken place in the last 3 weeks. This is an event that's been going on for the last 70 years. It has now escalated to where it is. There is fears that this might become a regional war, and there's also fears this might become a global war if enough players get involved. So we are hoping and praying that this is resolved soon as possible. We are now going to move on to the second part of our show, which is discussing Islamophobia. In some ways, they are linked because we've seen with the media narrative and what's being said on the news and on the regular channels and, newspapers like, I'm not going to name any, but the standard newspapers that do promote sensationalism, they have used this event as firepower against Muslims. So we are joined in the studio by Sister Rahana Faisal, who is part of the Luton Sunni Council of Mosque. Sister Rahana, assalamu alaikum. How are you?
I'm okay, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So we've been obviously speaking about the Palestine situation. We're now going to transition into our next part of our show, which was about Islamophobia. Have you noticed, or has it come to your attention, if there has been a rise? Because there's been reports of such, but I wanted to get your thoughts because you're on the ground.
So I think it's actually really important to say that those are really quite closely linked subjects.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in Palestine, the way that level of violence is being sanctioned and legitimized is through a deeply Islamophobic discourse, and by essentially universalizing Palestinians as Muslims, and we hear that in the kind of language that they use. Because we recognize that language here as well, right?
Yeah.
Things like, animals, barbarians, savages, highly racialized language. They are able to, or at least try and justify the violence that they have unleashed on the Palestinians. But in terms of Islamophobia, certainly we know that nationally that there's been an increase in Islamophobic attacks locally. Two things. Locally, yes, I've heard of people, and I've experienced it personally, that we have seen Islamophobic incidents. But I think what is also really important to remember that Islamophobia is not just kind of, and I think lots of people see it as this, is a kind of interpersonal sort of attack. So somebody sees you on the street, they say something, or they hit you, or something like that. And that's how most people understand Islamophobia. But Islamophobia functions in really quite insidious ways. So Islamophobia is present in our workplaces, for example. Well, it's in our schools.
Could you give us some examples?
So again, in the last few weeks, we've certainly heard of lots of Muslims talking about how they've been sanctioned at work, for example, in terms of talking about Palestine. But more broadly, Islamophobia functions in the workplace by holding back people who are Muslims, in terms of their employment, whether they're getting jobs or not getting jobs. We know that the BBC a few years back did some research and found, and if you put the name Muhammad on a application form, you're much less likely to get a job.
Yeah.
So Islamophobia functions in lots of different ways. Yes, the violence is the worst kind of end of it in terms of and links to our personal understanding of it, but it actually impacts on our everyday lives, and we should focus and remember that as well.
Yeah, and I think it becomes quite relevant in this particular time. I think it was Bassem Youssef who was mentioning this, and it's a very relevant point. I think it could be someone else, where you describe a human being as a rat or as an animal, and you do it over and over again, and obviously immediately a person won't think of harming a human because we're the same. But if you use that language enough, you can change the status of that particular group of people and essentially make them animals for intents and purposes. And therefore it becomes much easier to kill an animal, especially an animal like a rat or anything which is insignificant. And so, we've been seeing, there was an incident which really caught my attention in America. It was America, wasn't it? With a kid, this child. What I didn't know was the landlord, I believe that was a relationship, who lived above them. They lived in the same building. They used to play together. So they actually had a relationship before the whole Palestine issue that's just taken place. And so that after that language, after that indoctrination, this person, for everything he believed, he threw that aside and went and stabbed this child multiple times. And the mother, and the child lost his life. And I mean, that is shocking to see that they're part of, so people that we know, and I know this was also true in Bosnia. There's cases of people that when they had the war in Bosnia, or genocide again, people that they knew on a daily basis turned on them. And you think, how did that happen? And so now I think some of the points that you're making are valid here, which is the dehumanization of Muslims, generally speaking, is leading to this. We're also joined by Brother Ryan Frechchi. You have to forgive me if I don't pronounce your name correctly there. I'm doing a better job than Tarek did. He represents Cage and is a researcher based in France, and he authored Cage's report titled "We Are Beginning to Spread Terror," which reveals the existence of a state-led anti-Muslim persecution in France. Brother, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. So Michael.
So welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'd want to make this discussion not just Luton-based. Obviously, we've been discussing our local community. We've been discussing America. I know you're in France, and obviously we see it from here that it may be even worse in France. What is the current ground reality there? Because we heard on social media about even pro-Palestinian protests being banned. Is this something that's happening? And what has been the reaction of the Muslims so far?
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your invitation. And yeah, exactly. Basically, since the start of the war in Palestine, very unfortunate in France, like in other places, as you mentioned, the propaganda is in full display. But there's a specificity, unfortunately, and that's exactly what you mentioned. The pro-Palestine manifestations, demos were actually totally banned by the government. And just a few days ago, for the first time last Saturday, one demo was finally authorized, but most of them are totally outlawed, and we are seeing a full criminalization of any support for the Palestinian cause, which is quite brutal and quite shocking. And lots of Palestinian brothers and sisters who currently live in France voiced their sorrow, their frustration, because they were not able to express their solidarity in France. So it's quite shocking, but it's unfortunately totally. It's totally in line with the French governance, in which the French state-led Islamophobia, which is one of the most severe and draconian in the European continent.
Right. And so, we, and Sister Anne, I'll go back to you on this as well. We hear of Islamophobia Month. Can you give us a breakdown on that? I believe it was Imran Khan that made a big deal of that in the UN on a national, international level. But how does that affect us here in the UK? And I don't know if there is such a thing in France. Brother Rayan can confirm.
So in terms of Islamophobia Awareness Month,
Yeah.
So I think MEND were quite instrumental originally in sort of raising the profile of Islamophobia and dedicating this month of November to Islamophobia. I have to be really honest in that I don't think that Islamophobia Awareness Month institutionally has the same profile as you might have awareness months about other issues. And again, I think that speaks to the extent of Islamophobia that's weaved into our institutions and the systemic nature of it in Britain. But it's, I mean, ideally it's here to, highlight the issue, talk about what it means in people's life. But I mean, again, if I'm honest, in Britain, we still haven't decided what it is. We are still having a knock around, within Parliament, within various groups, trying to define what Islamophobia is. And although I get the importance of having something there, essentially we all know what it is. We all know what it is when we hear it, when we experience it, when we see it on our TVs, when we hear people talking in particular ways. Each and every one of us recognize it as for what it is, and we recognize it as wrong. I mean, what I would really like is actually probably better skill our own community in terms of the ways that we talk about it and understand it. I think oftentimes we will find people dismiss it. You will ask people, have you ever experienced Islamophobia? And they might genuinely say no. The reality is you have, but you just don't recognize it always. So I think there's lots of learning to do for us to be able to speak well about what it means to be a Muslim in the world that we live in today.
I think part of the problem can also be a lot of Muslims have never lived in Muslim countries, necessarily speaking. So they've grown up and lived all their lives, obviously, like us in the UK. And because it's part and parcel of the environment, you kind of just dismiss it as banter or as just being funny or, workplace camaraderie.
Or it's just something that we've got used to growing up. So we shrug it off, and Tarek and I have probably been slightly older than you two. And he'll say I'm much older than him, and he may well be right. But no, he's right. But we know that when we were growing up, the P word was used as a regular slur. There were the curry jokes, all of these kind of things. And there's been a reformation, shall we say. It's been, that type of racism that's directed at brown people has changed. We still get some of that, but I think we hear a lot more of this language that is very specifically around our Muslimness. So for example, I hate using the word terrorist in any context because I think it's become a highly kind of politicized term that whenever anybody hears that, they have a particular image in mind. So I don't like using it really in any context because people will tend to, and we've seen it again within what's happening in Gaza, people only tend to really understand terrorism in particular ways. So even though what we're seeing looks terrifying, we're not calling it terrorism.
Yeah. So Sadrana, a quick question over here. A lot of people, are afraid to speak out about this issue, especially Muslims. So would you sort of say that is a form of Islamophobia in the sense that they're scared to speak out for their own religion, for their own people, in fear that it may have an impact on their career or their daily lives?
Well, that's just it. So I think when you talk about people and they say, no, we don't experience Islamophobia, or there's not a lot of it. But the reality is, you're right. We know that most people, even when they do experience it, are unlikely to report it because they know that, or they feel that reporting it, and they are usually right, that it will have some negative impact on them. So whether it be something their child experiences in schools or something they experience themselves within the workplace, that is the impact of Islamophobia, in that it curbs the way that we behave, and it prevents us from speaking. It changes our behavior, it changes what we say, when we say it, and how we say it, because we are concerned about the repercussions of that.
Okay. Thank you, Sister Hannah. I'm going to bring Sister Halima Yusuf into this as well. She is an EDI advocate, activist, and also the regional manager for MEND. And I will actually ask her to explain what men do and who they are, even though I know who they are, but it'll be good for the listeners. Sister Halim, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. And I guess I could just do a little brief introduction of who I am. You've mentioned already, I'm the regional manager here at MEND in London. And essentially, MEND is a non-for-profit company that helps to empower and encourage Muslims, British Muslims, to get involved in media and British politics as well. So whilst doing that, we also obviously interact and educate about what is Islamophobia, and in the hopes of tackling Islamophobia as well. So we do various different trainings across the country, but particularly work quite locally, especially myself, with the community to help them engage and understand, educate them, make them more informed about their experiences as British Muslims, and get them involved in media and politics as general.
Right. So we were talking about Islamophobia Month, or Islamophobia Awareness Month. What does that mean to you, obviously being a part of MEND, and where do you see that going?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, of course, I think the sister mentioned earlier that we've played quite a pivotal organization in terms of creating Islamophobia Awareness Month when it initially started, I believe in 10 years ago now. We celebrated our 10 years anniversary last year. Well, Islamophobia Awareness Month did. They are a separate organization aside from us, but we are quite a prominent partner, and we helped deliver loads of engagement. And we do a lot of stuff, engagements around Islamophobia as our own organization to help build that awareness. And I suppose in terms of future, what we hope to achieve with Islamophobia Awareness Month is that acceptance and understanding of what Islamophobia is amongst the community. Just like, as we have so many other months that we celebrate to commemorate, the adversity that certain groups and minorities experience. For example, Black people across the UK will celebrate Black History Month, and that is a worldwide, but also national month that is celebrated. And I guess that's the hope of what we want Islamophobia to be. We want it to be defined first and foremost, so people can understand what it is. At the moment, there are blurred lines, and there are several different definitions, one of which we, unfortunately, as Muslims, can't come together and decide, what it is. And I think that's really important, because when we do have a definition, we can get an understanding, and we'll be able to tackle it better, I believe. So the hopes is to get Islamophobia on that platform as well, and people to become aware of it.
It will be hard to fight something you can't define, I suppose.
Exactly.
So just, if you could give us some stats and rundown on, in terms of Islamophobia, especially in line with what's happening in Palestine. I don't know if you have those numbers. That'd be really interesting, or just general trends as well. That would be very interesting to listen to.
Yeah, I suppose, I've got one stat that particularly one that we've been looking at quite recently, obviously with the latest Home Office hate crime report that's come out. So we've got, 39% of all religiously motivated hate crimes is targeted towards Muslims. So essentially making Muslims the most targeted faith group in the UK. And I think that's quite a shocking statistic, and one of which that really highlights the extent of Islamophobia in society right now, despite it not being well recognized, particularly within our government. I think it's a statistic that needs to be recognized and needs to be acted upon on, because again, Islamophobia doesn't just impact Muslims, it's perceived Muslimness. So anyone that is perceived Muslim can be perceived as a Muslim outwardly, can be affected by it. And, in terms of definitions of Islamophobia, again, as the sister mentioned, it goes much more beyond than Islamophobia being a overt type of prejudice. It's, a lot of the times as well, particularly in these times, many people in the different organizations and institutions experience Islamophobia in a more covert sense, where we don't see it but we experience it and we feel it. So, and then this statistic to mention is one that which cases have been reported. So as you can imagine, numbers are probably much higher than of which we're seeing right now.
Just Halima, you know, obviously it's been a decade now since the Islamophobia Awareness Month.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of reports on how effective it is, or you know, how it's helped the community, Islamic community or Muslim community?
Yeah, I guess it's helped build more awareness. A lot of institutions, a lot of organizations have, and a lot of politicians in general have really recognized it as being a monumental month actually now. So this year we've just launched IAM had just recently launched events in both the Senate as well as the Scottish Parliament. So we're starting to see it being discussed instead of something that is just shrugged under the mat. But so we can see it being recognized in a sense that people are having these discussions, and these discussions are now taking place. So I think definitely it has made an improvement and a massive a sense of raising awareness and making people not understand it particularly. Others might more better than others, but I think in terms of awareness, a lot more organizations and institutions have become aware of it. Yeah.
Excellent. Jazakallah, sister. And Brother Rian, just coming back to yourself, of course, Sister Rohana mentioned, and of course we spoke about the incident taking place in the US. In France itself, are you aware of any recent incidents taking place of Islamophobia, in particular in line with what's happening in Palestine, and perhaps maybe a rise in Islamophobia since then?
Yeah. Basically, what we're seeing here, there's a rising trend, unfortunately, and some aggressions, some physical aggressions that took place in the last few weeks. And but I would argue that maybe the most brutal and shocking manifestation of Islamophobia is maybe the almost complete ban on the pro-Palestine demos, because in and of itself it proves that Muslims' right to dissent is actually being totally outlawed. And I think that's one of the most, if not the most, substantial form of Islamophobia at the moment. There are some cases, of course, of physical aggression here and there. They are on the rise, but it's difficult to properly give you any stats, because unfortunately the main organization that was basically a like-minded in the UK, it was called the CCIF, was closed down by the government a few years ago. So we don't really have access to any kind of proper statistics, unfortunately.
Okay. Excellent. And sorry, Sister Rohana, just coming back to yourself, I know you mentioned there's various different forms of Islamophobia, and it can be, from children in school, for example, experiencing it, or maybe even people at work. What would your advice be to people out there who may be experiencing Islamophobia? What should they do?
I find a really difficult one, because
and he's only giving you 2 minutes to answer.
He's giving me 2 minutes. So look, the ideally, we most people in my position would say contact the police, let them know it's happened. It's unfortunately a fairly futile endeavor, but what it does do is it gives us numbers. So in terms of the extent of of hate crimes that people are experiencing, it gives us some sort of numbers on that. But that's really when you have the kind of interpersonal forms of Islamophobia that we initially talked about. So somebody saying something to you, somebody an assault of some type. You could report that to the police, and actually you don't have to prove it, so it will still get logged. If you perceive that somebody treated you in a particular way because of your faith, then that would be described at the very least as a hate incident. Right. So that's that would be one port of call. I know Mend have a reporting system that you can go to Mend to raise your concerns, and that's another means. I would say, look, if there are sort of people within your communities, the councils of mosques will certainly support people if they're experiencing here in Luton. Will certainly support people if they're experiencing Islamophobia and are concerned about who to speak to. And indeed, as you pointed out earlier, if they're too scared to do it, then certainly we would definitely advocate for people if they want to come to us and have a further discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd want to thank our two guests that joined us virtually, Brother Ryan Freshi and Halima Yusuf. Sister Halima Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair.
We're going to continue the discussion briefly after the break. We are discussing Islamophobia and especially how it's linked to what's happening in Palestine right now. Some of the stories that we've been hearing, and I'll cover another story that recently came to light from America again, about a sister that was also unfortunately killed there. Join us again after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live. We are joined in the studio by Sister Rihanna from the Luton Council of Mosques and Brother Asad. We were discussing Islamophobia just before the break. And obviously the situation in Gaza right now, in Palestine, generally speaking, has been somewhat the catalyst to the spike. You referred to there being a spike in London as well, and in other case in surrounding areas. What should, because and before the break you were talking about people reporting to the police. Now I think a lot of people be uncomfortable doing that. Number one, because they feel like what they say might be reported to someone else, or someone else might hear of it.
That's just an example of the extent of Islamophobia.
Yeah.
And how it's made and attitudes towards Muslims, how it's made people feel. And actually, we know minority communities broadly do not like to go to the police.
Yeah.
It was, we've known that since way back when Stephen Lawrence was killed, and we had the McPherson report. So we this has been a long-standing issue of minority communities and trust with the police.
So what I was going to suggest was, is there something maybe, I mean, I know MEND is obviously more of a national organization, but on a local level, is there a hotline? Is there a service that can be provided to someone, just as you say, to collect the numbers?
We don't have that, but what we would do, and most massages would, that if you go in and speak to somebody and they can, we do have mechanisms to support people within our local context.
Right. And obviously going back to our discussion earlier, we were talking about Palestine, and we didn't really get a chance to talk much. I don't know if any of you have been to Palestine before, but having visited myself, it's quite scary how different the two worlds are. And actually the purpose of the show today was to actually highlight what life might be like in Gaza or the West Bank, and Gaza probably slightly worse because of the control that Israel has there. Now, we're going to talk about initiatives within the community that are being done to help the situation. Understand there is a rally tomorrow, Tariq?
Yes, that's correct. There is a demonstration that's being organized by a group of people, in fact, including Luton Palestine Solidarity Group that Tariq mentioned, Luton Council of Mosques, Luton Sunni Council of Mosques, Enough is Enough, and there's a couple of other logos on the poster that don't come to mind. But yeah, there's a number of people that have come to organize that. It is a demonstration which will be taking place tomorrow outside the town hall. For those of you who don't know where that is, and you may be more familiar with the library, it's straight opposite the library where St. George's Square is. So outside the town hall itself, there'll be a gathering taking place, some speakers, a demonstration at 12 p.m. tomorrow. Now, I know Tariq mentioned that the weather may not be great tomorrow, and the forecast at the moment it's light rain, so it's not of course a storm as such. It is likely to clear around about midday, so hopefully, inshallah, it may actually clear. But that is taking place tomorrow at 12 o'clock.
Wow, you gave a weather forecast with the actual event. Thank you very much. That's unheard of. Also, another event that's happening is on the 11th of November. We have a fundraiser, a football tournament fundraiser for Gaza. To register a team, please call 0785 149 6861. I'll say that slowly. 0785 149 6861. From my vantage point, the only thing we can do for the people in Gaza right now is obviously raising awareness, raising funds, because that will actually help them massively, and making dua. So we can only do what is, in our control. I know there's a lot of frustration within the community, especially the young people, and so we've got to focus on what we can do here. And so I know a lot of people play football, and so the UKIM are organizing this event where they're just trying to get as many teams as possible and raising funds that way.
Just regarding the actual demo tomorrow itself, Sister Hana, I know yourself representing the Sunni Council of Mosques, one of the organizers, and of course there was one held a couple of weeks ago. One question often asked by the listeners is the effect of these demonstrations, and often, of course, the weekly marches that are taking place in London, which are, I must add, getting bigger and bigger. And there's one planned for the following Saturday, which is aimed at trying to get 1 million people on the streets of London, raising the issue of Palestine. But in your understanding, in your thoughts, and obviously being one of the organizers, what would you say is the impact of these?
So quite a few things, so bear with me as I go through them. So certainly there's an educational piece, helping build our knowledge, and I'd really urge anybody who's listening, please take the time, energy, effort to learn about what is happening here. I do think that there is a real need to upskill ourselves in terms of how we talk about this issue. Quite often we get this kind of Muslim versus Jews framing, which is not helpful, not accurate. And we want to move away from that and understand this for what it is. And this is a settler colonial problem. This is a problem of apartheid. There is much better and much more accurate conceptual language that we should be using to talk about what is happening there. Because unless we learn to talk about it properly, we're not going to be really good at supporting, our brothers and sisters there. So that's the first thing I'd just like to say broadly. But I think protests and what we learn from protests helps us in terms of upskilling. The second thing I would say is that a few months back, I met with a group of Palestinian women, and they'd been brought over here as part of International Women's Day by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And we asked them, here in Britain, what's the best thing we can do for you? Is it money? What is it? And they said, no, just keep talking about us. Keep talking about us. Keep the public profile of what's happening, up there. So prior to kind of media, social media, these things have been happening to us for decades. But the availability of cameras, filming, social media has meant that this is now happening in public view. At the moment, we are watching a genocide happening live, and although that is in and of itself, that's a horrific thing, for all of us. I know, like me, many of you have not been able to sleep well these last 3 or 4 weeks. But it means that it's not hidden. Nobody can say that we did not know this was happening. We know from speaking to these women that Palestinians themselves take a lot of hope from seeing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, 100,000, 500,000 last time, in London. If you are there in a country and you're enclosed and you think nobody cares, and then you see this image of, London Bridge absolutely covered, that means something to people. And they're seeing it across the world. But we're also trying to send a message to the government, to our elected politicians, who I know that we are all disappointed with, to say, look, recognize the strength of feeling within our communities about this. So this is, yes, about us. And actually, the last thing I would also say is that we've got a community that's upset, that is grieving, that's in mourning, and that is angry. And we want to provide an outlet for that doesn't get young people into trouble, that doesn't, get the rest of us into trouble, that is, that gives us a means of communicating and being around people who share our grief. So I think, like as Tarek has said, we sometimes hear what's what are we getting out of this? I think there's a lot of benefit to gathering together, standing together, expressing our solidarity with the Palestinian people, and having that noticed by Palestinians themselves.
I think also it goes back to that saying of the Prophet ﷺ, that if you can stop an evil with your hand, stop it with your hand. Yeah. And if you can stop it with your tongue, stop it with your tongue, or do something about it with your tongue. And if not, then the lowest thing you could do is to think bad. And what's interesting is scholars make the point that that's the lowest. Therefore, if you don't think bad of it, that means there is no iman left in your heart. So we are privileged in some ways to be in a country where you can voice your opinion. We're here right now talking. And obviously, we're speaking to the brother Ayan before. In France, that's not a right now. People have lost that right to a certain extent.
We have a government trying to do the same. Let's not speak too soon.
No, but the point is, let's use what we have right now.
Absolutely.
Because you're right. In the next month or so, we may not have that. So let's get out there. If you can attend a march in Luton, do that. If you can attend a march in London, better to do that, in my opinion, because that creates more of a statement. Obviously, it's nice for us to gather in Luton, but it doesn't have that same level of that message.
Go to both. Honestly, this is the least, if you can do it, it's the least that you can do. Take a stroll into the town centre.
I think I remember a comment last time. It might have been through the Luton Palestine Solidarity Group. It may have been friends of Al-Aqsa who actually mentioned this the last time this happened, and a lot of marches took place. And again, the question is asked that we march on week on week we are marching, the numbers are growing, yet there's absolutely no difference. So what difference are we making? And one of the brothers mentioned, I remember then, is the fact that every time a march takes place and that information is fed back to the brothers and sisters in Palestine on this case, and of course wherever marches are taking place, when they're taking place for Kashmir or any other atrocity taking across the world, they see those pictures, they get that information, and it gives them hope, because a lot of times it is that that feeling of hope of thinking, is this the end? Is the world not caring for us anymore? And is this what's happening? And I think what the brother said, sometimes we don't really value that hope. And again, Sister Rohan is right. We have to do more. And of course, where we can speak to, again, there's a lot of organizations in Luton are very actively in communication with the local councillors, MPs, not even locally, but of course on a national level, trying to do as best as we can. But I think sometimes where we feel, and again, a lot of the listeners out there who may have that feeling, and I've had people, I had a conversation with a sister earlier on this morning who's saying, well, what difference does it make? I've seen the marches take place. I would rather stay at home and make dua. And I said, do both. If you can go there, alhamdulillah, and if you obviously making dua, I see. To be honest, it'd be very strange to think that there's a person out there at the moment who doesn't pray and cry at night for the people of Palestine. And it'd be, and as Sister Rohana said, of course, I'd be amazed to know who can actually sleep out there. But I think it's that hope you give to people. And I think Luton-wise, it's local. And again, I understand, obviously, London is impact-wise a lot bigger, but when it's out there on your doorstep, and again, this is something that when we asked about from a questioning perspective, no doubt the people of Palestine are being tested, and they've been tested for a number of years, and Allah only knows when their test will continue. But we're tested as well, and Allah will ask us for what we are doing. And some of us may be in a position to say, well, no, I'm really sorry, I can't go to London. I've never traveled out of Luton. Some may not be financially able to travel. Some may not have the family around them, the support. They may be alone. They may be young. But Luton is at our doorstep, and I think this is sometimes will be questioned for what capacity we had. Allah knows best what we can do, and I think what we should really ask ourselves as individuals is, what can we do? What can we do? Are we articulate enough to write a letter to maybe our local representative? Are we able to have that conversation? Are we able to come to a local demo? Are we able to go to one in London? Are we able to go to maybe an international one? Whatever you're able to do, I think in this case, all I would say is ask yourself the question, what are you doing, and how are you going to respond to that question when Allah asks us, what did we do?
Yeah, I think absolutely that. I think we, on a really, really personal level, I've had lots of people call me this week and say, you need to sleep more and don't worry, maybe take a rest. But I want to, we all, it is our iman. We're all gonna die. It's, we're all gonna die, and our belief is that one day we will stand before our Lord and we will have to account for our lives. And I want to be able to say that at the point, when the shuhada of Gaza and Palestine, when they stand before us and ask us, what you did, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to say I did whatever I could within my means, and my means are limited. It might be more than the next person, and it might be less than somebody else, but within my means, what I could do, I did. And we all want to be able to say that. The other thing I just want to say, talking about the march tomorrow, the other thing that we're asking people to do is we want people to bring along a teddy bear with a message on it, each one representing the children who have been killed in the current assault on Gaza. And this has been organized by some young people. They want to have a kind of visual representation and a way of focusing on those young lives. So if people are coming along and they can bring something along with a message, that would be great too. I'm seeing a great big teddy bear here. Yeah. I have my eyes on it. So who knows? You may see it there.
It's going to be hard to carry that out.
No, I'm sure Tarek can manage. I'm sure he can manage. But we want to do our best.
That's great. And another point I want to make is a couple of years ago, a bit more than a couple of years ago, we went to a Palestine protest like everybody else. And I remember some of the brothers out there, smashed into Starbucks. There was McDonald's there. Someone went into McDonald's, started breaking the glasses, throwing the chairs out. And next thing you know, the police came on horses, calling off the whole area, like snappers up top. And I remember I was with me, my sister, and my mother. and all of us were calling off. So the point I'm trying to make is when we are going to these protests, try to keep it peaceful, because what we don't want is sort of our violence to sort of, destroy the message.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say when we have our events locally and nationally, remember that we are there representing, the most honorable people, people who have been through decades now of oppression. And we should do our utmost to do justice by them. And that kind of behavior does not do justice by them. We negate all our efforts when we end up, as you say, behaving in that way. That we are Muslim. There are, we have standards around the way that we behave. And obviously that kind of behavior transgresses that.
And I think, moving slightly away from the demonstrations, if you let me, I think you made a point earlier, sister, about, educating yourself. And I also think a lot of people don't know the history. They don't know how we are in the situation that we are. And then when you do have that discussion at work or in school, you can frame it in a completely negative way, sometimes anti-Semitic way, because you have to understand the situation. And so, it's not against the Jewish people. I'm not going to go into the entire discussion now. It's not against Jewish people in any way. It's against, obviously, the Zionist movement, which has kicked out Palestinians from their home. And so understanding what you're talking about is very important, because I think a lot of people have this frustration, but they can't express themselves. And the funny thing is, I see very eloquent people on social media struggling, right? So the average Joe or the average Abdullah is probably thinking, how do I convey my message to someone? The first thing you got to do is educate yourself.
Yeah, and just to say, if we think about the kind of the media language, I almost think that it's deliberate in framing this constantly as Muslims versus Jews, and this idea that Jews are under threat from Muslims. The Holocaust wasn't caused by Muslims.
Yeah.
Which was, obviously, the most horrific thing, but that wasn't caused by Muslims. And particularly for us living in Britain and our government here, where we've just passed the anniversary, 106 years since the Balfour Declaration, where, famously Britain allocated this bit of land that they had colonized, to gift it as if there was nobody else already living there, which has led to, where we are today. So it's really important that we understand the history, to understand that, no, this is absolutely not about, and actually, I have been really, really humbled by the amount of Jews that we are seeing marching alongside us. Right. There's been an occupation of Waterloo Station, of Liverpool Street Station, all led and organized by Jews, being an impressive, unwavering solidarity with the Palestinian people, and any kind of. Also, this is ultimately an anti-racist struggle as well, and you can't be involved in an anti-racist struggle whilst using racist language.
And yeah, absolutely, we can't criticize them and then do the same thing ourselves. That would be foolish. And the other thing I want to say, actually, on a practical point, we were talking Islamophobia and stuff. I was speaking to my sister recently. She's in America. As you know, there's a Dr. Talat. I forget her second name. She's very vocal. She's very active in the community in Texas, America. And again, she was killed by an Islamophobe. So I would, especially to the sisters and even brothers, especially if you are going anywhere at night and if you are going particular areas, please either avoid it or go with someone, because right now, the way things are, it's not safe to be going out on your own and exposing yourself to that. It's not practical. And it's not that we should be scared and stay at home, but you've got to be wise. If you remember, there was a spate of acid attacks a few years back, and so it's not wise to go into these situations knowing that they're present and just pretend like they're not there. So take your precautions, and this is just practical advice.
But definitely, I'd just like to add, to be honest, the fourth part of the show was actually supposed to be around keeping safe in the winter, where of course you have the early nights, and especially for a lot of people who maybe just having to do that because they finish work late, they're having to walk from the station home, or maybe they that's the only time they can get some exercise in, and they're going for a walk or a jog maybe at that time, on how to keep themselves safe. But I think linked to the issue. And I think they all linked in different ways. Of course, the issue of what's happening in Palestine, Islamophobia, and of course trying to keep safe. So not necessarily just a Muslim perspective, but generally people out there, I think in the winter at the moment, of course, Maghrib is 4:34 today. It'll get earlier and earlier to a point where very soon it'll be at 4 o'clock. So at 4 o'clock it will be dark. So you potentially may even have children coming home from school if they've got some after school activities, coming home in the dark. Definitely, of course, people finishing work 4:30, 5 o'clock. Maybe by the time they come home, if they're working out of town, maybe 6, 7 o'clock, which may seem nothing. 6, 7 o'clock is early, but when of course it's been dark for 3 hours, and of course wet and windy and all the different weather conditions as well, less people out there on the roads, less of course even maybe lit up areas around the town. So I think just be cautious of the route that you plan. Maybe you may plan around more busier areas, more lit up areas. And I think in particular for sisters and possibly even brothers who visibly look Muslim, i.e. wearing the thobe or maybe the hijab, or maybe even the niqab, which is probably obviously meant even more for people to be aware. There was a brother last week who actually had an incident where he was getting ready for Jummah and going to Farley Hill Masjid. A van stopped in the middle of the road. I think 3 guys came out and just literally beat him up. For absolutely no, for what it seems, absolutely no reason whatsoever. So it is taking place during the day as well. This was at 11 o'clock in the morning in Luton, 11 o'clock in the morning last Friday. So this is taking place. It is something that we need to be aware of, and I think in particular, maybe something that Sister Rohana might want to add on, in particular for the sisters out there. I think it's definitely something that we do need to be aware of. We do need to make sure that we are cautious. We need to protect ourselves and just be aware.
I mean, look, we're already going through enough pain as is with what's happening in Palestine, and then the silence of the world and the, this is obviously, I'm coming from a personal space, not from a radio station, representing the radio station anyway, the sheer hypocrisy. And so there's a lot of frustration, and the last thing you want is, whilst we're going through this difficult time, is to have something happen to someone in your family. So that's really, we don't need that right now. What we're going to do is focus on Palestine. What we're going to do is focus on raising awareness, making dua, getting out to those marches, writing to your MPs, speaking to your councillors. Like, I'll share something privately to all of Luton. I did recently meet a number of councillors, and very unashamedly, I asked them, look, who's willing to speak about Palestine? And most of them rejected me. They turned it down immediately, and they made excuses, and they looked this way and they looked that way. And it was sad to see, because these people are people we bring in. And, all our lives we've been told, vote Labour, vote Labour, vote Labour. And clearly that's not bearing the fruits that we thought it once would. That's a separate discussion. But the point is, we need to do everything in our power. If that means writing to your MPs, if that means speaking to your councillors, actually going to their houses and saying, what are you doing? It has to happen. If it's the mayor, if it's the councillors, especially if they're Muslims, they should be held accountable, because the reason you come in to power, again, these are my opinions and not the opinions of the radio station. The reason
I'm going to say that everybody should be held to account. If you stand for election,
100%.
whether you're Muslim or not Muslim, and the leader of the council is not Muslim, but nonetheless, it's a responsibility she's taken on. We had Tom Shaw here last week. If you've taken on that responsibility, Luton is a town where faith is important to people, whether they're Muslims or Christian. It's a faithful town, and it's important that politicians recognize that. And they are elected on the based on on the idea that they will represent the people who elect them. So whoever they are,
and this isn't even
they are accountable to the community.
A faith issue, as far as I'm concerned. This isn't a political issue. This is a human issue. This is an issue of basic human rights. If we can criticize the way the Israelis were killed, we have to criticize in exactly the same way, considering there's been 5 times more people killed, maybe somewhat more, but we can't do less and shy away from the fact that there is a potential genocide. There is a genocide happening, and we need to speak out. Again, these are my views, not the radio stations. Tariq?
Indeed, just to add, of course, it is, as Rohana said, every person in any matter of responsibility, whether it's your local imam, for example, or whether it's us as a radio station, we have a responsibility, and I believe everybody should try their utmost best to fulfill their responsibility. But just coming back to your point around, being told to vote a particular party, whatever your reasoning may be to vote for a party or to not vote for a party. Again, we don't have any party representatives here. We did speak to Rob earlier on, who is a Labour member, and he mentioned that there was, he obviously also admitted the fact that, albeit a bit late, there is a current statement out there from Labour. So again, from any political political parties, of course, there's no representation at the moment. So from a radio station perspective, this is not to undermine any particular party or any particular councillor or MP. And the question to being asked, and again, I mean, being part of a number of different discussions taking place in the town, there is a situation where if you're in power, if you're in a public position, you need to be prepared to answer questions, and this is the time to answer those questions. So rightfully, I think everybody has a right to ask those questions.
Absolutely, and being constituents, you have the right to express your feelings, and that is your right given to you by God. And so therefore, please do
the
that.
Government.
And the government until maybe the next month. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, Brother Asad, Sister Rahana, Brother Tariq. It's been very insightful, and we pray for the people that are suffering. Join us again next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.